Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daryl Urbanski, your host as always. And today we are joined by Henning Schwinum. Henning, also known as the Fractional Guy, helps growth minded founders, owners, and CEOs land the right sales and go to market leader fast. As co founder and managing partner of Vendux, he uses the proprietary perfect match system to pinpoint the ideal CSO or CRO for fractional, interim, full time, or advisory roles, often within days, not months. Henning is a creative, results driven global executive with deep experience in sales, marketing, supply chain, and general management. He's built and led worldwide teams, driven 20% compound annual growth. He's improved margins dramatically and launched services that became major revenue engines. He coaches operators through hashtag #BeFractional and leads Fractional Leadership Alliance. Educator, advocate, and author, I've asked him to join us here today to share his story and insights into what moves the needle for growth. So, Henning, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you, my friend?
I am doing very well. Thank you, Daryl, for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. And before we get into kind of your insights and what you've learned through obviously your very impressive track record and career, how did you even get started in this? I mean, is this a family trade? Were your parents doing this sort of work and you're just carrying the torch?
No, absolutely not. It's not a family business. My dad was a PhD chemist and worked for one company his entire life. My mother is a school teacher and taught primarily elementary school. So, entrepreneurship is definitely not something that I grew up with.
So how did you get going then? Like, did you have like a paper route, a lemonade stand? What got you out of that into this?
That's a good question. I think there are several factors. One is curiosity, the wish to learn new things. That bug caught me when I was 16, and for the first time got on an airplane and flew to the U.S. to stay with a host family for a year. I'd not flown anywhere. I barely knew a little bit of English, and but decided that I wanted to be in the U.S. for a year, live with a host family, and expand my horizon.
Germany, right?
Cologne on the Rhine River. So I
Okay.
flew there and stayed there, and that bug is something that infected me. At that point, I came home and really was eager to learn and eager to just expand my knowledge. And then started traveling. The entrepreneurial bug came a little later, and I first started out in the startup world being an early employee in a startup in Kansas City. I think I was employee number 7 at the time, and at that point I really found out that I'm a solid operator, but I never thought that I could have an idea myself that would really transpire into something meaningful. And so I stayed on the operator side for of startups for 16 or 17 years, and then an idea hit me, need that I saw in the marketplace for myself that didn't have a solution, and that's how Bendux was born.
Got it. So you had 16 years of battle scars and in the trenches, tight restraints, last minute improvisations, trying to help grow other people's ideas. And then you kind of had your own spark. So what were some of the biggest lessons, I guess, or challenges that you faced in your 16 years, you said, helping with these startups?
Up until I started my own business, I always thought of those as being my hardest years because it was really hard to get a startup going in Europe in a very conservative industry, the chemical industry, that is not really known for process or organizational innovation. They're known for product innovation, but not for other types of innovation. I always thought of those years as being the hardest, but now, having built my own business, I now understand that it can get even harder. But some of the a lesson learned is the fact that I am really grateful to the founder who took me on and who kept me on for 11 years until we sold the business. And so I was able to experience all the different growth phases of a startup business.
Mhm.
I got there before we hit $1 million in revenue, started Europe at $0 revenue, and then, stayed all the way through the time when we were able to sell the business. And today, as I place fractional executives into the same kind of businesses, but with very growth phase specific experience, I look back and say, I'm really grateful that he kept me on for that long,
Mm,
because in hindsight, he may have been better off if he got somebody for the 0 to 1 million, and the 1 to 5, and the
mm,
5 to 10, and the 10 beyond experience, because that's what I do when I place fractional executives.
mm.
If we have a founder who's at 2 million and wants to grow to 5, then I look for somebody who has done that specific journey before.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
a
the
can you speak to that? Why does that matter? Can you speak to that? Because I think some people listening, they haven't walked that journey. They haven't seen behind the curtain, so to speak. So can you
yeah.
yeah.
Well, the challenges are different. When you're at 0 and you have to find your first client or the first 5 clients, that's very different from down the road when you have 100 clients and can point back and can provide references. The available resources for that journey are very different, right? At a pre-revenue company or even at $1 million, there isn't a whole lot of money to go around, and you have to structure sales as a often as a full cycle approach, where as a sales rep or even as a sales leader, you cover the entire sales cycle. Whereas in a 5 or 10 million dollar business, you want to start breaking the process up into segments where you have, a group focused on lead gen early on, BDR, SDRs, then hunters to go out and hunt new business, then farmers, and you develop into a customer success or customer service type organization. So every growth phase has its own challenges and has its own restrictions, and it's not that it gets easier down the road, it just gets different. So it's not that it's so much harder to win the first client than the 100st, but you approach it
I
differently.
think that's really well said. I remember in Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith writes about the specialization of work. And he talks about, in the beginning, people are doing the whole process. But then as we got into specialized roles, he uses an example of making pins. Talks about how a team of 4 maybe could make, let's say, 1,000 pins in a day. But then you have a team of 6 or 8, and it's not double or triple. They're doing 1,000 pins in a day. And it's through the specialization of work and through finding efficiencies and optimization and even laziness, where there'll be like a boy who's got some job, but he wants to go play with his friends and he figures out a way to, MacGyver, duct tape and bubble gum, some sort of,
Yeah.
tool to help him get things faster. And so it's an exponential process. So I think that's really
Yeah.
powerful. What would you recommend to someone that's either starting out or struggling? They know that they're in between a leap of one level to another. Is it I guess I need to separate these questions. Is it self-evident when you enter these different phases? Or is that part of the problem is people aren't aware where they are and they're trying to solve new problems with old methods?
I think most founders are aware when they face a problem and that they face a problem. What is the challenge is to then understand what to do about it. And at the highest level, the most simplistic advice is find somebody who's done this before, right? If you are at a certain stage, and in often revenue or number of employees, funding stage, those are the kinds of stages we're talking about here. There is somebody who's done this before. There are thousands of people who've done this before.
Mm,
Find somebody to help you. And I'm not talking about full-time employment. I'm not saying you need to hire full-time people, because that often isn't necessary. The skills are available on a fractional basis. You can get that talent as a fractional contractor. And to your point earlier about the specialization, that's exactly what that is. You specialize people, and then you don't, the guy who, and that's how they can go from 1,000 to 30,000 pins. And likewise, you can have let's just do the example. You can have a leadership team of two full time, or you can have a leadership team of 6 fractionals, each with their special knowledge for their particular area at roughly the same cost. And guess who grows more and grows faster? The
yeah.
people who have the specialized knowledge in their particular area. So look for those people, look for that help, and that's how you, I think, as a founder, can go through, get any problem resolved.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think if you make the analogy of someone trying to win a gold medal at the Olympics in a sport like judo, there's what most people do and myself included, you sit in a garage with some YouTube videos and books and cassettes with a buddy and a mattress, and you figure it out. But some people who are wiser, they go find at least one person who's won a gold medal at the Olympics, and if they're really smart, they'll go find two, three, four, and say, "Hey, can I get your eyeballs on what I'm doing? Can I come to you with my plan and my updated data and get your insight?" And it's just very self evident. One of these people is going to, everybody's got a chance to go win the gold medal, but it's pretty clear who's going to have easier go of it, and maybe get there faster with less injuries. So that's a
Yeah, I
really
mean, they
powerful.
have a coach for judo, they have somebody for their physical conditioning, they have someone for nutrition, they have someone for their psychology. And none of these people are full-time dedicated to this one athlete, but they're full-time dedicated to their specialized field of expertise, and they advise 5 different athletes or 10 different athletes on that particular area and make them successful.
Yeah.
I like the analogy.
Yeah. I think it's powerful and it's important too. It's just like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It's really tough for one person to do everything on their own. And, that's
Yeah,
the African proverb. If you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk together. And that's sort of, it's a good analogy. I listen and read a lot of Stoic stuff. And Marcus Aurelius has the whole, we're made for cooperation like hands and feet. Like that's just, it's self evident. Put children together and it's just
yeah.
it's in their nature. So I love that so much. So in today's day and age, with so much happening geopolitically and with all these technological advancements, what do you think are some of the skills and behaviors that are really important for own founders to develop in themselves and their staff?
Well, I think there are many things that make great founders. And having worked with a few and I can think of one or two in particular, what I always found is that if you're a founder and you understand that you yourself as that one person can't do it all, you're not good at everything. And then you look for people that are better than you are in those areas where your skills are very limited. And then you bring these people in and have them join your team. And I think that's the from a founder perspective, that's the most important trait for a founder to have. And if you are able to assemble a team of people where every single one is better than you are in their field of expertise, and then you have a real chance at being successful. I think that is a key quality to have. And then we can talk about many other things, all the interpersonal skills that make great leaders because founders in a scenario like that turn into leaders. They're there to motivate and to make sure that they bring out the best in the people that work for them. And those leadership qualities is something that serves well founders and any other leader really well.
So now I know some people might hear that and go, okay, but how do you afford all this? If you need to hire help because you've got a problem and the problem, and maybe it's a two-pronged question, right? Like, how do you measure the effectiveness? Is it always about revenue?
At the end, it's always about revenue because without customers, you don't have a business, and without revenue, you have nothing. I mean, that's the nature of business, right? So I think what if I would pinpoint something that founders in some cases don't do well is finding the right people. So as soon as founders or companies get investment, the first thing they do is they go on a hiring spree, right? And they go out and hire all kinds of talent. And they look, and I feel they're looking for the wrong thing. So, first of all, they don't assess how much of that particular skill they actually need. And if you're seed or pre Series A or Series A, many of these senior functions are not necessarily full time functions. They can be done fractionally, which right out of the gate leads to savings compared to that full time hire. But then you, as a founder or as a founding team of a company, I find that a lot of times what they're looking for is what they label culture fit,
Hmm.
and I I've seen too many times that what culture fit actually means is
Like the,
likability.
yeah,
I
yeah.
like
Which means they're like me, which means they have the same weaknesses.
yeah And so you hear after an interview somebody say, "I really like this guy," or, "I really like this gal." And that for me, red flags go up because now all the factual checking of whether the person is actually a fit for the role and brings the right qualification go right out of the window. It's now all about likability. And in that combination, I mean, I place fractional executives in companies where founders come and they've had a full-time person in that role before, and it didn't work out despite all the things that they thought they were getting. And now they get smarter, and they are forced to get smarter because now there's not that much money left, and now they have to get a fractional in order to fix what's been screwed up
Right.
by full-time before. So it's this combination of thinking about how much of that skill you need, and applying the right criteria. And while I'm not dismissing culture fit, to me it's a secondary criteria. You first check and make sure that the person you're looking at
Mhm,
checks all the boxes, and they
mhm,
bring all the skills and experiences that you have predetermined that are necessary for the job and for the person to be successful. And then the culture fit is more to me like a go, no go decision, right?
mhm.
If something's amiss, when you feel, eh, when something in your stomach is turning, listen to it and say no, and
Yeah,
go to the next person. But
yeah,
then you start over again. You check all the boxes and make sure they fit all those requirements.
yeah, yeah.
And so culture fit is more that than anything else.
I think that makes sense. I mean, there's the interpersonal dynamic with the coworkers, but also when you hire someone, you're hiring them to do a job. And although we just said that we're designed for collaboration, that person has to be able to get the work done. No one can do your push-ups for you. So at the end of the
Yeah.
day, can they get the push-ups done? Can they do the work? And then are they going to make sure? Are they going to upset the apple cart? Are they going to get along with Sally and Susie? Because you don't want to create problems by bringing them on board. And I think that that makes a lot of sense. I think people have a hard time sticking to factor analysis. And like I said, like they get persuaded easily in that.
And I admit I've fallen into that same trap over the years. I have hired people where my gut told me that something wasn't right, but I liked them, and so I hired them, and every single time it turned out to be a bad decision. So that's why I feel so strongly about, even before you look at people, determine what are you looking for in past experiences, and don't bring me labels like superstar
Yeah.
or rainmaker. That means nothing. Also, the fact that they may have been successful at another company
Doesn't mean
doesn't
anything.
really mean anything. So, but think about what will it take for somebody to be successful in that role. And one thing is always past experience, right?
Mhm.
You can be the first person that teaches them the ropes of a job, right? Let's say you hire somebody who's done middle market sales, and now you want to put them on enterprise sales. You can be the one teaching them how to do this. It's a choice.
Mhm.
But be aware of what that choice means. It
Mhm.
means that you have to invest your time, because otherwise they will not be successful. They will not be successful applying their mid-market skills, and they will not be successful if you just leave them to their own devices. So if you want to invest your time, your resources in doing that, that's fine. My recommendation, especially to SMBs, is always to find somebody who's done this before.
Mhm.
Um, that they come with just the right experience and not just transferable knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's wise words. It creates a chicken and the egg problem for some of the people. Like, how do I get the experience if I can't get the shot? And so that can create, but at the end of the day, it's a jungle out there. There's lots of opportunity. There's so many shapes and sizes. You have to try to make the best decision for the success of your company at the end of the day. And that's where apprenticeships come in as well. That's another way to, anyways, I've sidebar here.
You can, but then you have to make that conscious decision that you're going to educate that person. Apprenticeship programs are the right reference because you specifically take somebody on that does not have the experience,
Yeah.
but your job now is to train them so
Yeah.
that when the apprenticeship is over, they can do the job.
Well,
But
and when I said that is what you're 100% correct. When I said it, I was also thinking about how they say one is the worst number in business, one key employee, one key client, one key anything. And so if
Mhm.
you've got someone, if you're a founder and you have someone that's done a job before, but they're the only person in the company that does it, you can hire an assistant for them, so to speak, as an apprentice. And that may be the way that you now build in redundancy and get a second person who knows how to do it for less
Mm.
because you've got someone that's capable in doing it now that they can shadow under, and that gives
Yeah.
you some sort of backup. So that's part of what I was thinking, how you would get there, because in a lot of companies that becomes a key man issue. Is a huge, I mean, the sacred knowledge problem is a huge bottleneck. I don't even know what the dollar amount would be that is costing companies, but especially the sacred knowledge problem, the one or two
Mm.
key person bottleneck. But again, do you think AI and what's happening with technology is going to change that? How is that impacting companies? And I mean, we just heard recently, I mean, there's been lots of layoffs. I think the most recent one was Jack, the founder of Twitter. They let go of something like 40% of their workforce,
Mm.
4,000, 6,000 people, something like that. Very nice severance package. It was something like 20 weeks with benefits and, really nice singing letters. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think we all agree that it will impact every single worker, every single employee, every single job in our economy. The question is, how quickly and where will that happen? And when you talk about the layoffs, you talk about tech companies. So tech companies make up in the US, I think it's 10% of the economy in terms of people and number of companies, right?
Mm,
So it's not that, if Ford or other major employers lay off in the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of people, then there is a signal in that. But we're not there yet. I think AI will reshape the workforce just like the steam engine and the conveyor belt and all the other pieces of innovation have done, but they've not gotten rid of people
yeah.
as employees.
Yeah.
We're still around, we're still doing things. And it's gone, the work that we do today, not physically, but mentally, is probably way more challenging than what
Mm.
people did 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
100 years ago was all about physical labor. So I think it will again change and will become stewards of AI processes, of
Mhm.
AI agents, of AI systems. As a workforce, like with any of those innovation trends, we have to retrain.
Mm,
And the one challenge that is unique now is the fact that this is happening so quickly,
mm,
that the innovation cycle continues to increase,
mm,
and that for a lot of people hard to digest.
mm,
How quickly can I change myself and my skill set so
mm,
that I
mm.
continue to be employable?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You bring a good point. I mean, calculator used to be a job. Like there were human calculators. You would go and do math. That was the
Yeah.
job. And then we don't need. There's going to be massive unemployment. We don't need calculators anymore. We got electrical ones. They said that about farmers. We got tractors. We're not going to need farmers. And hey, we got spreadsheets. We're not going to need accountants. And hey, we got QuickBooks. We're not going to need CPAs and tax advisors. But we still have them. I think like you say, the biggest thing is the speed at which it's coming. I think that's my. I would suggest. Do you have any tips for anyone? For me, I keep telling people just focus on the problem you're solving and just try to be, this is Greg Glassman from CrossFit has this great little saying. Markets are ultimately unknown and unknowable. If I ask you, I'm paraphrasing now, but if I ask you how many people are in market to buy a car today, you can look at keyword searches and foot traffic, but ultimately it's unknown, unknowable, and fluctuates constantly. But
Yeah.
everyone can acknowledge and recognize excellence. And so if you just focus on solving a problem and being the most excellent at it, with your unique mechanism for doing that. And then if AI helps you do that, great. If it doesn't help you do that, it doesn't change anything.
And that's where I think we can improve ourselves, and we can learn by looking around and not just executing the process as we have done for the
Mm,
past years, but look at the tools that are out there
mm,
and incorporating them into our processes. We will become more productive, will become hopefully better, more knowledgeable, or the outcomes will become better as a result of that additional knowledge. And that's how we stay relevant in
mm,
in every job. I think people who talk about that, in 5 years there won't be humans anymore involved in the workplace, and it's all be automated. I don't see
Yes.
that. I don't see that happening. I see them um, as indicators of something um, that this person might be striving for. So if you think about the beginnings of if you think about the sales process, right? 50 years ago, it was 20% marketing and 80% salespeople. 10 years ago, it was 80% marketing, 20% salespeople. Now we're talking about employing AI in marketing, in lead gen, in BDR, SDR outreach, in closing deals, but I don't think that that will anytime soon will have two bots, a buyer bot and a seller bot, talk to each other
Yeah.
about purchasing a $100,000 piece of equipment. I still believe there will be humans involved. Now, strongly AI guided, but at the end, a lot of these processes still rely on the trust factor. You're spending money, you trust that this works.
Mhm.
And if I mean, what AI what a lot of AI is today, it just regurgitates
Yes.
what has been published out there.
Yeah.
So if you wanna know as a buyer whether this piece of equipment does a good job, there is a lot of stuff out there,
Mhm.
but do you trust that
Well,
stuff that's
that's
out?
David Deutsch, the godfather of quantum computing, has this great book. It's not an easy read, but it's one of those books you chew on and then come back and reread it a couple times, called The Beginning of Infinity.
Mm,
And in it, he makes the case that real science, good science, are specific explanations with details that are hard to vary without changing the outcome. So the
mm,
example is, how do we figure out the Earth wasn't the center of the universe? Well, Galileo wasn't the first one to have that theory or that hypothesis. He was the one that invented the telescope and found out how to prove it using the phases of Venus and Jupiter. And with those, you could use, and geometry, you could indicate, okay, we're here and they're there and this is changing. And he talked about how with AI, that we'll never, until we can clearly articulate the specific way we create intelligence, sentient intelligence, we're most likely just fooling ourselves. And like you mentioned, a lot of this, I think an easy way, if people don't get it, is Google search. That was the infancy of LLMs, because you would type into a search and it would try to predict the end of your sentence, but it was limited to 160 or 280 characters or whatever. And you get that predictive search down there, and that's sort of what's happening. Except for now, it can digest and regurgitate a whole lot more.
a whole lot more, a whole lot faster.
Yeah.
Um, and in the past, we had a Google search result list, and we barely looked at the first two screens, and almost never went past that. And now, hundreds, thousands of search result screens are all lumped together,
Yes.
um, and, and then a machine makes the assessment what is truly valuable to you and relevant to you, and they're getting better at that.
There's still a
Still,
key issue. Sorry to interrupt. There's still a real
yeah.
key issue, because if common knowledge was good, more people would have six pack abs and $1 million in their bank account. And so, like what you say, when it digests billions of websites and you ask a generic FAQ and it gives you a generic answer, if you took that answer and we take our judo champions and we compare with what the judo champion, the gold medalist, would say, there is a stark contrast between the two. And that's a
Yeah.
real threat.
And as a result, I don't think the result is that more people have six packs. The
Right.
statistics actually say the opposite. We've gotten more and more overweight, despite the fact that we have more and more information that tells us how bad it is.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So you still need expert. Just because you have an expert tool doesn't mean you know how to use it expertly. But these tools, just like the printing press and the internet and tanks, you don't want to be bringing a stick to a tank fight. That would be a bad strategy. So you still need to figure out how to
Um,
drive the damn thing. So you work with so many founders and even fractional executives. What are some of the habits that you think are sort of the 80-20 that the most successful seem to embody?
So on the fraction executive side, I would say that those who have spent part of their career focused on networking and building a network, those who have taken risks and changed verticals and changed job roles over the course of their career, they are better suited now for the fractional executive world, because being a fractional executive means that every couple of months you jump into a new company, adjust to their systems and to their people and to their workings, and address the problem that you were contracted to solve. And if you spend 30 years in one corporate career, that is not giving you the right skill sets to be able to do that. So I
Mm,
think those mixed careers are important. And what I mentioned earlier about having built a network, that was exactly my problem when I left my last corporate role in 2019, and my intent was to become a fractional executive. The realization was I'm not well connected enough. I mean, I had at the time 700 LinkedIn connections, almost all of which were people that I had worked with before or that I had somehow met in person, but
mm,
they weren't founders, owners, CEOs, board members, investors, startup communities. So I had the entirely wrong network for what I was trying to accomplish. And as I meet fractional executives today that are starting out and that have on LinkedIn 5,000, 10,000 connections. They've spent time, they've invested time into networking. There are also more opportunities available. So I spoke earlier about how over 11 years, the founder of my first startup stuck with me, and I was able to do all these different growth stages. I did not have inherent knowledge for any one of those stages.
mm,
So but I also didn't have a network that I could go to and that I could ask. So I mean, my resolution was that I read a lot of books and I Googled a lot, right? That those were my two information sources in order to solve the problems that we were facing at that particular moment. Now there are plenty of communities, executive communities out there, and I feel that there is a lot of value in peer-to-peer advice and peer-to-peer
mm,
guidance. Because
mm,
if
mm,
you're facing a problem, whatever it is, someone has faced that problem before.
mm,
Likely thousands have faced that problem before. And so if you're a CRO, or if you are a CFO and you have a particular question, go to a peer-to-peer network, and someone there will have had the same challenge and will have an answer for you. So I think those are um, traits of successful fractional executives. And on the founder side, we already talked about the ability to find people that are better than you, that are smarter than you, the ability to lead and to be a true leader, not a manager, not a boss, but a leader. I think those are key qualities.
mm. That's interesting. Yeah, and I think that's a real challenge for a lot of people because often when someone starts a business, they do it because they're good at something. I mean, I worked with Michael Gerber, the author of E-Myth, for just over a year, and he's the one that coined the term "work on, not in your business." And he's got the whole. Most entrepreneurs are technicians having an entrepreneurial seizure, and that's two different. It's two, they're
Yeah.
a technician that's really good at something, and they decide to start the business, but then they realize there's a whole skill set around running a business that they have to learn. And I think
Yeah.
that so what you've mentioned that I feel that business is very Shakespearean because in all of Shakespeare's works, the main characters fell victim to their greatest personal flaw. And I feel like that in business. And that's part of why you need to build a team around you. And often that's where people get stuck and limited. It's the founder bottleneck is often holding them back. And it's tough to see. That's why people have coaches. They don't coach themselves. It's hard to see from the sidelines when you're playing the game. So I think what you're doing is a very valuable, very, very valuable skill here. Do you think, I mean, we already touched on this, but do you think AI is going to change? I mean, we just saw massive layoffs as AI kind of launched and got developed. A lot of these companies are hiring back. I keep asking about the future, and that's why I'm saying, do you think that at least when it comes to like you use an AI tool to matchmake, right? Do you think that
Yeah.
there's going to be more and more of this happening and going on? Is this the way of the future? Or as someone who's behind the scenes and sees how the sausage is made, are there issues with the technology, or not? not trying to say flaw, but that prevent it from fully taking over.
Yeah. At the risk that what I say is very self-serving, let me say this. I do think there is a, a great risk in sort of a DIY mentality where, as a founder, let's think about the process of hiring talent. As a founder, you can go to someone like me and I'll help you find the right person. But you could also think, I'm going to save a few bucks and I'm going to do it myself because I'll go to ChatGPT and have them write a job description. And then I'm going to use another tool to scout LinkedIn and find me a person that matches that job description. And then I use mass emailing to write to all these people and reach out. And then I'm going to send them to an automated interview process where I don't talk to these people. I have a bot talk to them. So I've seen that happening. And again, at the risk of sounding self serving, I believe that I can deliver better outcomes. Yes, our matching software is AI based, but we have what I call white glove service at the beginning and at the end. For example, on our executive profiles, many of these of AI based tools, the only thing they can rely on is self declared data from the executive, aka their LinkedIn profile and their resume, right? Where they write about themselves. Well, guess what they're writing, right? No one's saying, I was pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
I really didn't get along with the boss here. And they didn't, the job was nothing like what I was promised. No one puts that into their profile, but it is really important information, not because it says that somebody did a bad job, but it helps. I mean, it helps them figure out what they're better at than other things. It helps identify areas where maybe it's not their strong suit. They were asked to do something in the course of their career that wasn't really a good fit. And if you're in a corporate environment, you get all kinds of things thrown on your desk and told to do this that you're not good at. So I think all of these experiences are important, and I pride myself and ourselves in the fact that we can surface those and that we can use those in the right way to create better matches, and therefore do a better job than most founders would do in a DIY process. And I can apply that same thinking onto a lot of different things. And I take this also to heart myself, right?
Mhm.
As a founder, I do a lot of my marketing myself. Am I good at it? Do I have a history of successfully running marketing for companies? No, absolutely not.
Mm.
So somebody who's a professional in it would and is doing a much better job than I as a founder doing it myself.
And it seems to work. I think you just acquired a competitor recently, didn't you? Maybe they weren't a competitor, but
Not a competitor, but another matching platform, yes.
yeah. So if you're able to run your own and acquire complementary service businesses, you must be doing something right.
I always say it still pays the bill after 6 years, so
Mm,
something must be going well.
I like that. Skills pay the bills. I like that. It's much more tactful than my riches and niches, bitches pay the bills. I like that. That's a good writer down it. So I guess you've answered so much, and I do want to be respectful of your time. Can you recap for us some of the biggest mistakes you see people making? We've talked about the opposite side, but to really hit the nail on the head for the founders and even the fractional executives who are wandering in the dark looking for each other, so to speak, what are sort of the biggest mistakes that they're making?
I think I'd come back to something I hinted at earlier, which is
Hmm.
ask for help. There's always somebody there who's done this before, who faced this problem before, and
Hmm.
that's true for anyone, for whether you're in a corporate role or an entrepreneur or a fractional executive. Ask for help. There are always people out there, and I mean, that's the one thing that unites us as humans. If we want to talk about humans versus AI, the fact that most of us are geared towards wanting to help others, a give first mentality and an abundance mindset. Most of us have that. And if somebody's asking me for thoughts or input, if I don't know the answer, I will say I don't know. As a human, I wouldn't fully mislead somebody or
Mhm.
maliciously mislead somebody and tell them something wrong. But if I know a solution to the problem they're sharing, I'm eager to share what I've learned and
Mhm.
what I did. And you ask three people and you get three probably slightly different approaches, but out of those, you can form your own solution and your own opinion.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Henning, I want to be respectful of your time. Is there anything I haven't asked you yet that I should have asked you?
If I may, I would love to tell people that I just published a book
Yes, please.
titled Right Sized, Right Skilled. And it's a book about how to make fractional assignments successful. And so it's not about how great the model is, it's not about why companies should embrace the model, but it's really about how do you make this successful? What do both parties need to do by themselves on their end? And what do both parties, the executive and the client, need to do together to make
Mm.
this successful? Book's available on right-sized-rightskilled.com. Yeah. So
All right.
appreciate the fact that I could wave a little flag here.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So right sized hyphen rightskill.com. If you have any other questions or if you're looking for help finding your fractional team, you can go check out Vendux.org, VENDUX.org. VEN, V is in Victor, VEND is in dog, UX.org. Go check that out. Henning, thank you so much. I've got a page of notes here. Thank you for coming and sharing with me and my audience, knowing you've got your own direct reports, your own following, your own community, your own priorities. Thank you for coming and sharing with my audience and I so we could all do a little bit better.
Yes. Thank you, Daryl, for having me. It was wonderful.